Good morning, everyone. It is Sunday. I'm wearing my Sunday sweater. This is my daddy sweater, I guess. I had it quite some time. I think it was my own father's, but I wear it on Sundays because it's one of my favorite sweaters. I used to only wear it at Christmas, but I wore it last Christmas and I kind of liked it. I think I wore it last year too. But anyways, good morning. I'm not doing Sunday school today, obviously, because we're not talking about theology stuff. Although I will have a little caveat on that in a second, though. As you guys may know, I do a blog. I wrote a blog last couple of days. I've been trying to get it kind of proofread. It's been difficult to do because of the subject matter. I did give it to Dr. Malpass. He wasn't able to. He hasn't got to it yet. I gave it to Ozzy. Ozzy said, "Give it to Malpass." I actually had a friend of mine, Zemo, kind of look it over. He fixed a few things. I just put it out today and said, hey, look, if there's problems with this, let me know. I put it on the Great Debate Community Facebook page if people want to try to correct it. And I also put it on the Atheist Experience Philosophy discussion page. And so there might be issues with it. I don't know. I took a lot of it from a source and I kind of changed it and kind of explained it a little bit better. Because that's what I like to do. I like to take stuff and then kind of explain it from a purely layperson's perspective, which is myself, because I have no expertise in this topic. And I will tell you, modal logic is hard. It is probably the most difficult thing that I've ever seen as far as logics. It's one of the most difficult. I barely scratched the surface. I don't have any understanding of modal logic. I still get confused between the difference of K and T and S4 and S5 and all the different axioms. So don't look to me as somebody who understands modal logic. I just thought that this was kind of interesting of how seemingly logic can break if you're not very careful. So hopefully when we go through this blog, you'll be able to see what I mean by that. But as that caveat that I mentioned before, so I just got done. First of all, how's my audio levels? I forgot to ask. Hi, everyone. Everything's good to go? Yeah. And I was on Twitter, and one of my friends, you guys know him as Reformed Christian Apologist or Reformed Boy, or I don't know. He goes by so many different names now. But he was saying that he doesn't believe God exists. He knows God exists. And me and a few other people are trying to explain to him the problem with that, right? Because in most theories of knowledge, if you know something, you have to believe it as a condition for knowledge. Now, not all of them. There are some semantic theories and some other theories where they're not belief first, and I get that. But traditionally, canonically speaking, knowledge requires belief. So we explained that to him, and I think we got it. But then he made the argument that a lot of Christians do, that he said, well, atheists know God exists. And yeah, he said something like atheists know God exists. And people are trying to explain to him, look, atheists do not believe in God, right? And if atheists do not believe in God, they don't meet the condition for knowledge. Ergo, they cannot know God exists. You're placing your own usage of these terms inappropriately to people that they don't apply to, because I don't know God exists. I'm not an atheist, but I don't believe God exists. So people need to stop doing that. Especially, this is a thing I'll ping on the theists for. Usually I get an atheist. Theists, stop telling atheists that they know God exists. It's nonsensical. It makes absolutely no sense to say that somebody knows something when they don't believe it, right? Again, based upon the more traditional forms of knowledge. And plus, you're just imposing your usages on other people. Don't do that, okay? I can tell you right now, I don't know if God exists or not. I have absolutely no knowledge one way or the other. I don't know, right? I have no knowledge that he exists. I have no knowledge that he does not exist. I don't make those claims. I couldn't even justify them if I tried. Other people say they can. I've had people tell me, I know God exists. I know God does not exist. Okay, they might be able to justify themselves. I don't know. I can't, right? But you can't tell me what I can and cannot justify and what I do and do not know. Because I tell you, I do not know God exists. By a theist telling me that I do, they're lying. Right? I don't know how else to put it. They're being dishonest. If I correct them and say, look, I don't know God exists, and they're like, well, you do, then I think it's very disingenuous. I'm going to put that under the line because I think that they willfully know, and I mean it, they willfully, at least, I hate the word, use the word know there, but they willfully are trying to ascribe a position, epistemic position to you that you don't have, right? So, update, I will be in LA on the 16th, it looks like, and the 17th. I'm probably going to go down a day early. May or may not hang out with modern day debate. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. He'll be down there with T-Jump. I'm going to be doing a philosophical dialogue, I guess, with T-Jump for about 90 minutes, an hour or something with Q&A. I don't know how it's going to work. And I don't really know what the topic is either, which is fine. Usually it's funny because I usually tell people, hey, have a topic before you go into these discussions. But those are usually debates, right? I'm not really having a debate with T-Jump, so I don't care what the topic is. I have an outline, and I've had a part 1 on the GDC channel, the Great Debate Community channel. I did part 1 of what I think I want to go over. I have a part 2 coming up. We're going to go over some of the other T-Jump's arguments that make no sense to me. But the initial one that I had was dealing with his prescriptive definition, or stipulative, I should say, more definition of atheism, which is a person who believes there are no good reasons to believe in God, which I have really, really strong reservations about and think that is extremely weird. But there are some other things that he's mentioned that I want to kind of talk about. So, I mean, the way he resolves Hume's is odd is really strange too, which I'll save it for you because we'll go over that on the GDC channel later on. Hey guys, so let me check what we got in the live chat. I have no idea how many corona deaths around here, man. I think there's been 2 in the LA region and 1 in San Diego. I think there may have been, like 18 confirmed in California or something similar to that. But I know there's only 3 around what I would consider my local area, and that's within about 2 hours, which is San Diego and LA. So, hi, Kino. So, let's see here. All right. So anyway, so let's kind of dive into this because I don't know how long it's going to be. I don't know if anyone wants to come in. If you want to come in, you're more than welcome to. But I definitely want the live chat's opinion on this. I know that a few people looked it over. I know Intrigued Feline has kind of looked this over. I have modified a little bit. I have made some corrections based upon some input from Ozzy and some from Zemo. But I think the overall context makes sense. But again, reminding people, this is a layperson's blog. I have no expertise in this whatsoever. I'm not an intellectual on this. I'm not even a pseudo-intellectual on this. But modal logic sucks. It's hard. But I found this interesting enough to try to write something about it so I can understand it and then explain it to others. That's it. I like to do these things. It's just for me. And if people want to watch and read, that's great too. All right, so let me kind of bring this up here. All right. Can you guys see this yet? No. There we go. All right, now you should be able to see it. The problem is now that I can't see the live chat. So let me pop out the live chat real quick. So give me 1 second here. I want to see what you guys are saying on this. So I got to pop this out here. And I got to move this over here. Do that. And I got to do that. All right. No, that's the wrong window. All right, there we go. Now you guys can see this. Now make sure you guys can actually read this at the same time too. That's not the right thing. There we go. I feel like it says there's something odd about it at the moment. I can't put a finger on it exactly, but it's something odd. Yeah, I kind of get that impression too. But I don't know what it was. I know what it was for the first one. There was something odd about that, and me and Zemo corrected that one. So I think I fixed that one. Okay. The second one's a little more difficult, even though I think the logic is kind of right because I made sure that the logic that I used actually had precedence. So, and there was a relationship there. So I don't think there's a problem there. But again, I put these things out for you guys to evaluate, right? I mean, I'm not saying that these things are unfallible or unassailable. That's nothing about my blog is anything like that, right? These are not expert stuff. These are things put out there for you guys to check out and say, hey, I agree, I disagree. Maybe there's some problems here. But I mean, I like to have my arguments evaluated. This is, again, when people run the narrative, or if you disagree with Steve, he gets upset. No, if you disagree, tell me I'm wrong and explain it to me. That's what I'm looking for, right? Like I said, I had a blog the other day. Somebody pointed out something with logic, and I was like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And so I fixed it, right? That's how it works. Streamception. Oh, okay. I don't know what you're referring to. All right, so let's kind of dive into this. All right, so this is don't worry about it. This is just like this is basically just a lethic square. This is basically saying that there's a couple of different things in modality wise. So when you have modal logic, you have things that are necessary, things that are impossible or morally impermissible if you're dealing with deontic, possible and contingent. So these are just relationships between the contraries, subcontraries, kind of like the square of opposition, right? Which is Aristotelian. But we're not going to get into that. I thought it was really cool alethic diagram there. Let me make this a little smaller there so I can kind of see both what I'm doing. Okay, so modalities deal with things that are possible, things that are necessary. Now, a little preliminary before you get into this. For something to be necessary, it must exist in all possible worlds. Okay, so when somebody says something's a metaphysical necessity, that means it exists in all possible worlds. If it's contingent, it means that it must exist in one and not exist in others. It cannot be exist in all, and it cannot exist in none, and it must be based upon something else. Contingent usually used two ways: that way, or it's based upon something other than something else. So if it's contingent, it means for it to exist, it has to exist because of something else. And then there's impossible, which means it cannot exist in any possible world. There are also other versions of modal logic, like what's called deontic logic or deontology, which is moral obligations, right? So if somebody says something is morally impermissible, they're saying that'd be the equivalent of the alethic impossible, right? Is morally impermissible or forbidden, as opposed to permissible or obligatory, right? So if you see modal logic and you see an O, it's deontic. It means obligatory. That means you ought to do it. You're obliged to do it as a duty or responsibility, which is, of course, deontic. So that's a little preliminary thing on here, so you get that out of the way. By the way, like I said, don't take me for a logic person, okay? I happen to just like the topic of logic, but I am I barely could do a logic problem. I swear. I understand the concepts, but in order for me to like to do the logic problems, I still have to go into like an what's called a natural language checker, and I have to like use the rules of inference, and it takes me a while. Not that good at it. I just like the concepts of logic, right? And so I'm more of a conceptual person rather than an application, more theory than practice. But I'm learning it, and as I learn, I want to share it with people because I find this stuff to be very fascinating. This is why I do these blogs, and this is why I do these videos. Feline says, contingent can also be described as not needed. Something is not needed, but it still could be there. I don't know if I like that definition because need implies desire. It implies some kind of subjective thing. I wouldn't say not needed. I would put more of it as not contingent means that it's not relied upon anything else. It's not relying on anything else. It can exist independently. Like 1 + 1 = 2 is a metaphysical necessity. It's not reliant upon anything. Of course, it's based on axioms, but it's still a metaphysical necessity that in all possible worlds, 1 + 1 = 2, right? And so that's something that's contingent. My existing is contingent. I don't have to exist in other possible worlds. I do exist in other possible worlds, at least this one, right? Because this is the actual world. But I don't, in other possible worlds, I don't exist. And once again, as a reminder, possible worlds are not the multiverse. We're not talking about multiverse. These are conceptual things. Now, there are people that argue that possible worlds do have ontology, concretism. I mean, these are a modal realist type position. A guy named Lewis promoted this particular position that all possible worlds do have some kind of ontology. They are physically existing worlds. Now, you might think that that's kind of crazy and it bloats your ontology, but there is some precedent for that type of argumentation. I don't particularly agree with it, but it's not far-fetched as you may think. It's actually, it's argued very, I think, if I remember correctly, it's very argued the ways Quine argues that mathematical Platonism should be the case, is that we should think of these things as they are concrete objects in some sense. I might be wrong on that. That's how I understand it. But again, a modal realist would say that these possible worlds do have actual ontology. They're not actual worlds in that sense, because actual is indexical, meaning that there's only one actual world, no matter where you are. If I exist in another possible world, that's Steve in that possible world, that is the actual world. So actual world is indexical to an individual or like myself, right? So if I don't exist in those, if me as like this person right here don't exist in the possible world, because I personally only exist in this one, but I as Steve, how should I explain this? This Steve right here, how about that? This instantiation of Steve only exists in this possible world, which is the actual world. But I do exist in other possible worlds. Does that make sense? That's what they mean by indexical. All right. Way off topic here. That's what we do, though, on this channel a lot. We get really off topic. All right. So I write, for me, modal logic is extremely complicated. Oh, see, I already see. Nobody caught this, right? Feline. You didn't catch that. I put and in there twice. How did I do that? Okay, I'll fix that afterwards. I don't. Now you know what? That's bothering me. I got to fix it right off the bat. I made a mistake. Not sure how I did that. So let me fix that real quick. Talk amongst yourselves. This is going to drive me nuts. By the way, Feline does proofread a lot of my stuff, but she looks for more grammatical errors and stuff like that. I can't believe that I did. Nobody found that. All right, there we go. See how easy that is to update. Pretty cool, right? That's what happens when you actually own the domain, which I do. All right, so now I fixed that. All right. So, and I think it's far more recondite than most people, than most other forms of logic. That just means that basically it's very obscure and very difficult to understand. However, even with my exceptionally little understanding of the basics of modal logic, there are some very interesting things which seemingly break logic. I kind of wanted to share how it could be used to challenge a more mundane way of looking at things using classical logic. Classical logic is pretty mundane, right? I mean, it's, if P, then Q, P, therefore Q kind of stuff. This is basically predicate logic. Should be propositional logic. So when you start getting into things like a little more complicated, like predicate logic and modal logic and alethic logic and deontological logic and epistemic logic and doxastic logic, these things get a lot more complicated, but they get a lot more interesting because I think they have a lot more nuance. But again, they're very difficult, right? I just barely scratched the surface of some of this stuff. All right. So let's start with the classical rule of inference, modus ponens, which can be written a number of different ways. So I give people a couple of different ways that I've seen modus ponens written, or similar. There's a lot of different ways you could describe modus ponens, which is a rule of inference, right? But the basic one, I like the shorthand. This is the one I use the most when you see this, okay? Feline, yeah, if you want to DM me the grammar and spelling mistakes, let me know and I'll put those in, yes. Again, I write these things at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm not even kidding. I mean, I write these things really late at night, and that's when I have my most brainstorming. So I don't really care about the spelling and the grammar. The way I learned how to write in college, they don't really give a shit about that when you're brainstorming. When they want it out, they tell you just get it out on paper. Then one of the papers I wrote for college, I had like 5 revisions, and these are mandatory revisions, right? These were not like just revised. It was like, okay, you do just a really rough draft, then you have another draft, then you have another draft, and I think it had 5 revisions, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it had 3. No, I think it had 5. But yeah, these are fine. These are like how I learned how to do it. So I just throw this shit out there. So I try to go back and correct. And by the way, I did run this through a spell checker, so that should be right. And I did correct some of the grammatical errors, I thought. So, but if not, let me know. Les says, is this directed to the layperson, only accessible to elite few who have studied philosophy? Can everything reduce to mathematical equation? Who's it directed at? This is to laypersons, yes. Yeah, you don't need any understanding of philosophy to, I think, understand this stuff for the most part. I mean, it's pretty simple, I think. That's what it's directed at. And no, I don't think everything can be reduced to equation. All right, so this is how I write it. This is not, by the way, this is not greater than in this particular thing. I had to explain that to somebody a long time ago. This is not greater than. It just means arrow. It's a shorthand notation. P implies Q. P, therefore Q. That's what these little 3 dots are. So if P, then Q. P, therefore Q. This is the same thing here. This is not a subset symbol in this particular instance either. This is just one way of writing and implied. So P implies Q. P, therefore Q. And then this is the most canonical that you'll see often, I think, for predicate logic, or propositional logic. P implies Q, therefore Q. And you'll see a lot of times in an argument, you'll see this P first, and then you'll see the implication, and then you'll see the conclusion, right? You see it written that way, which I don't like writing it that way because I have to like think that. Like, for example, if I said, I use this all the time. If the moon is made of green cheese, then I'm a moose. The moon is made of green cheese, therefore I'm a moose, right? That is perfectly logically valid. But if I said it as the moon is made of green cheese, if the moon is made of green cheese, then I am a moose, therefore I'm a moose. That is also logically valid. That is still modus ponens. But for me, it doesn't flow as well. So I always put the implication first, then premise, and the conclusion. And that's just me. I don't think there's a set rule behind it, but if it's anybody that understands this decently enough, let us know. But I don't think there's any set rule for that. All right. So they're all simply read as something like, if P implies Q, P therefore Q. If P then Q, P therefore Q. Or, meaning if P is true, then it implies Q is true. If P is true, then Q must be true. However, is it possible to have a valid argument with all the premises true, all true premises, which is sound, with a true conclusion? No. But if you're not paying attention carefully enough, it can at least appear so. This is called the modal scope fallacy, or a fallacy of misconditionalization. By the way, did somebody just message me? I got to check this real quick. I always get paranoid when I'm on air. Somebody's messaged me something's off. Oh, let me check here. No. Nothing important, just Nick. All right, Nick, I get it. Stop beeping me. They can hear that. All right. I love you, Nick. All right. So let me get back to here. All right. So yeah, if the preposition, if the argument is valid, which means that it's a logical rule of inference, then yes, then if the premises are true, the conclusion must follow. That is true, right? It cannot be any other way in classical logic, right? So how can you have an instance though where at least the conclusion appears wrong, right? It depends on the scope, what we're going to be talking about here. So God damn it, stop it. Oh God. All right, so here's the okay, I'm going to mute this real quick. Sorry about this, guys. Notifications off. There we go. All right. Wow. Now you guys won't hear that any longer. Turn my notifications off. But I hate doing that because that means, well, no, that's just for that one message. I was going to say, I hate turning off all notifications because somebody needs to message me going, hey, you're screwed up here. Fix your stuff. All right, so let's say I have the argument. P is, I have a dog and 2 cats. Okay? And Q is, I have at least, you know what? Here's another mistake. Oh, man. Fix this real quick. This is another reason why I do this video stuff, because I can catch the stuff when I'm going over it, I think, better. And so when I'm explaining it, so it kind of is my way of proofreading it as well. These are kind of just me proofreading these things. All right. So here we go. So let's say P is I have a dog and 2 cats, and Q is I have to have at least 1 cat. Okay. So if I have a dog and 2 cats, then I have to have at least 1 cat. I have a dog and 2 cats. Therefore, I have to have at least 1 cat. Now, assume this argument window, okay? So what this is saying is that if I have 3 pets, right? I have 1 dog and 2 cats, then I have to have at least 1 cat, right? Which is common sense, right? Now, again, with what's called without loss of generality, which means you can apply it to multiple different types of arguments. I can have 2 cats and 1 dog, therefore I have to have at least 1 dog, right? So there's actually a logical thing for that. What is it called? I think it's called. Oh, I don't know the rule of inference. That if you have, like for example, if I have three balls in a bag and I pull, and there are only 2 colors available, and I pull the first one out and it's blue, then the other 2. Wait, what was it? If I have 3 balls and they have to be at least 1 color each, that's what it was. And then I pull one out and it's blue, then one of the other ones have to be red, right? Or vice versa. So without loss of generality, I could have a dog and 2 cats, which means I have to have at least 1 dog. If I have 2 dogs and 1 cat, then at least one of them has to be a dog. So again, that's just what is called what's called without loss of generality. You guys might have heard that before. All right, so to be logically valid, the only requirement is that it is a valid rule of inference, such as modus ponens. It makes absolutely no difference to what P and Q represent or instantiate it with if it is valid rule of inference. And again, I had this problem on the atheist experience Discord the other day, trying to explain to somebody, it doesn't matter what P and Q are. The thing that I say, if the moon is made of green cheese, therefore I am a moose, the moon is made of green cheese, therefore I'm a moose, is logically valid. And he's like, well, there's no relationship between the moon being made of green cheese and being a moose. I'm like, well, the premises aren't true. It's unsound, but it is logically valid, right? In order to be sound, the argument has to be both valid and the premises have to be true. Clearly, those premises aren't true, so it is clearly unsound, but it is logically valid because of the structure. That's the only thing that the validity worries about is the structure, right? So, to be logically sound, the argument has to be both valid and the premises are true. If any premise is false or the logic is not valid, such as the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises, then the argument is unsound. All right. So here we have a conclusion of therefore I have to have at least one cat, which of course has to logically follow by modus ponens. And let's assume I do in fact have one dog and two cats. Then it has to be true by necessity. Okay, and that's true. But it isn't the case the same as necessity that is necessary that Q is true. Well, no, because it's not logically necessary that I have to have at least one cat, right? Now, let me clarify that. There's nothing logically saying that by metaphysical necessity or logical necessity, I have to have one cat, right? Because if I have to have one cat, in all possible worlds, I have one cat, or at least one cat, right? Well, we clearly know that's not true. In some possible worlds, I have a cat. Some possible worlds, I don't have a cat, right? Or at least one. So it's not logically or metaphysically necessity that in the case of we call wide scope. So, I think it would be the narrow scope actually. Or maybe I have that verse. I always get those confused. Whatever. But it's in the big picture, right, of all the possible worlds. There are possible worlds I don't have a cat. So there's no logical necessity to say that I have to have a cat. Right now, it has to be the case 1 + 1 = 2. Right, that is a metaphysical necessity. Right, but there's no metaphysical necessity that I have to have a cat. So the statement, the premise, the conclusion here, therefore I have to have at least one cat, is not true. Right, I don't have to have one cat. But where does it go wrong here? This is a valid argument, right? So where's the problem here? The conclusion doesn't follow here. Even though it's valid, where do we make the mistake? So I say, well, no, because it isn't logically necessary that I have to have at least one cat. It's merely relatively necessary, which means the conclusion is actually false, even though it's a valid argument, but not sound, depending on how the argument is interpreted. Now, what makes this not sound? See if you guys can figure this out. Again, I worked with Zemo on this particular one, so I think this one's pretty good. But this is a valid argument here. But what makes this particular argument unsound? Because the conclusion clearly doesn't follow. I don't have to have one cat. I given the premises are true, I have to have one cat. But can you guys spot the error? Let's work through it. And maybe you can spot the error. Seemingly, the form of the argument using modal logic would be P implies Q. H implies C is the cat is necessary. Having at least one cat is necessary. I'm using H here to be have, and I'm using C here to be cat. Having one cat is least necessary, or it's necessary to have at least one cat. That's what this little symbol, this little square symbol means: necessity or necessary. And by the way, that also means that it's true in all possible worlds, right? So H implies having I have a dog and two cats implies that I have to have at least one cat. I have 2 dogs and 1 cat. Therefore, it is necessary that I have a dog and 2 cats, or have at least 1 cat. The problem with that is this is obviously not true. I don't have to have 1 cat. Having a cat is contingent, right? Again, some possible worlds I have a cat, some possible worlds I don't. So, read as if I have a dog and 2 cats, then it is necessary, and this little square is read as necessary, that I have to have at least 1 cat. H is to have, C is for cat, have to have a cat. I have a dog and 2 cats. Therefore, it is necessary that I have to have at least 1 cat. But this clearly isn't something that is logically necessary. I do not logically have to have 2 cats, as to be logically necessary would mean I would have to have at least 2. I would have to have 2 cats in all possible worlds. Actually, I should change that to. Actually, it would just be one cat, wouldn't it? Yeah, it'd just be one cat. Because I'd have to have at least one cat in all possible worlds, right? So let me fix that real quick before I forget. So let me see here. So let's see here. Therefore, it's necessary that I have at least vocabulary. Clearly, that's something that is logically necessary. I do not logically have to have at least one cat. As to be logically necessary would mean I have at least one cat in all possible worlds. I don't know why Zemo didn't catch this. At least one cat, because we're talking about having at least one cat, not two cats, right? That's the premise, which is not anything doing with modalities. My having at least one cat contingent, at least one cat. All right. Let me update this. All right, let's go back. Let's see where we're at now. All right. So, all right. Where are we at here? There we go. All right, so let's try this again here. You guys paying attention here? You guys should have caught that from me. I could have two cats, sure, but that's not what the argument is. I have at least one cat is the conclusion, right? I do not logically have to have one cat, as to be logically necessary would mean I'd have to have at least one cat in all possible worlds, which is clearly not true. But of course, there are possible worlds where I do not have at least one cat. Contingent, again, means that it's true in some possible worlds and not true in other. And it has to be at least true in one and it has to be, not true in another. My having at least one cat is contingent and not something that must be the case in all possible worlds. So the conclusion Q, therefore I have to have at least one cat, is false, right? That is a false conclusion. Even though it's a valid rule of inference. Actually, you know what? I should actually do that too. Get that little symbol. Gotta get my symbology right here. The way you can do therefore, which is that little triangle, is a semicolon and then a period. Just for you guys' information. Because if you can go copy that symbol, right? That triangle symbol means conclusion. But I got the wrong symbol there. How to get a solo list there? A slash. Fix that. There we go. Fix that. There we go. All right, there we go. So this little symbol here, like I said, you can go copy paste it, or you can just use a semicolon and period. That's what I do. Therefore, I have to have at least one cat is false, even though it is a valid rule of inference and the premise was true. How could it be false, as it should relatively be obvious that there's nothing that makes it such that I have to have at least one cat? The first premise is false, given this implication that in that I do not have to have at least one cat is necessary, as having cats is conditional. Thus, it is unsound, and the conclusion is false for the same reason. It is not necessarily true that I have to have at least one cat. So the reason why this fails, given this interpretation, is because this part here is false, right? If I have to have two cats, then it's not necessary that I have a cat in all possible worlds, right? So this premise, giving this interpretation here, this premise is untrue, right? Given that the modality here, the operator here is based on Q, then this is not a sound argument, because if I have a dog and two cats, it is not by metaphysical necessity that I have to have at least one cat in all possible worlds. You guys see that? Based upon this interpretation. Right? So how do we fix it? So how is this resolved? By changing the scope of the modal operator, which is, again, that symbol. by necessity or necessary from the conclusion to the implication, which is the conditional premise. So by moving this operator out here, you get it is necessary that given I have a dog and two cats, then I have to have at least one cat. This is the modal operator here, not to the cat, right? So it's not to Q. So now this becomes I have a dog and two cats. I have to have a cat. It restricts the scope. So based upon given what I have, then I have to have at least one cat within that scope, but not necessarily the case that I have to have a cat by necessity. So now the conclusion is true because it is, but not as a logical necessity, but as a conclusion given the implication that I have to have a dog and two cats, then I have to have at least one cat. I have a dog and two cats, therefore I have to have a cat. So by changing the scope of the modal operator, we can restrict the modal operator to just the conditional premise. Therefore not having a conclusion, which is a consequent, that appears to be necessarily true when it isn't. It isn't necessarily true, meaning that the case of it be the case that it is all in all possible worlds, but true by necessity, given it being logically deductively inferred and the premises being true. Okay, so does that make sense, guys? That given these premises are true and given the modality that it is necessary that if this is the case, then it follows by that. It restricts it. It's called relative necessity rather than this more wide view that I have to have two cats, because obviously I don't. So that's how you would restrict that modal. That's called a modal scope fallacy. I've seen people with actual scope fallacies before, and I remember somebody, I'm not going to mention their name, but it had a scope fallacy, and they just would not believe that me, Bert Poole, and Dr. Malpass explained to them why they had a scope fallacy. They never got it. And they, look, people can say I'm wrong about this stuff all the time because I barely know this stuff. I mean, a minuscule amount, fraction of a fraction of a fraction that I understand this stuff. But to say like Dr. Malpass, doesn't understand the basic stuff is pretty hubris to me. But some people might know who I'm talking about who had that scope error. They kept on saying that not B, P, and not B, not P was wrong, which is agnosticism, right? Agnostic is somebody who does not believe P is true and does not believe P is false. Not B, P, and not B, not P, right? So that isn't nonsensical as this person was claiming. They had a scope issue in their reasoning. All right, so how are we going so far? You guys up to date on this? You guys good to go? Does it make sense? And thanks for doing this with me, guys, because again, I check this guys through you when I do this. It's a lot easier for me to find my own mistakes when I'm able to explain to people and have these types of hangouts, right? All right. Maki says the penny dropped. I agreed with the expression of the modal thing. Good. Yeah. The first one seems pretty straightforward, right? Except for a few mistakes that I corrected. That was pretty good to go. This is based upon some other people's work. Like I said, this is derivative. Didn't come up with this argument by myself, obviously, but I wanted to explain it in a way that people could understand. The link to the actual source is in the blog itself. So I'm not plagiarizing or anything. I just taken what that person for coursework was saying and relating it in a different way and relating it in a way people can maybe understand it easier. All right. So now I'm going to get a little more difficult. This one is a little bit more complicated. This one is actually, again, derivative, but I added my own spin to it. And by adding my own spin to it, I added some more modality to it that wasn't on the original, which again complicates it. And I don't know if it's right or not. Ozzy wasn't sure, and Zima wasn't sure. Again, it's just hard stuff. We just don't know, and I'm hoping Alex can maybe walk us through it and see, because modal logic is hard. Okay, but maybe you guys who do know this kind of stuff can help us out here. So, all right, so let's try this one. Another example would be relating to epistemology. To know that P requires P must be true. And this goes back to what I started at the beginning with Reformed Christian apologists, trying to explain to him, look, to know P infers that you believe P. Actually, it entails it, to be honest with you. It's more than just an implication or inference. It is actual entailment because of justified true belief, which is normative, right? When I would say it's normative, it's normal. I got to break myself of that habit. And even though I don't think it's wrong to use normative that way, Normative can be used as ought, like you ought to use it, almost like an obligatory, or it can be used as, to me, just it's normal to use so. But there's a distinction to be made there, and maybe it confuses people when I say normatively. I use it to mean normal more often than I do as an ought, right? So when I say like it is normative atheism with this definition, or used as the belief God doesn't exist, I'm more using it as normal, but I also believe you ought to as well if you want to like understand the topic. But whatever. Another example. To know that P essentially, for simplicity here, is merely a schema, because there's different schemas in modal logic. Like I said, there's case schema. There's different axioms you could use, S4, S5, dealing with the very basics of how you want to have the axioms of modal logic. We're not going to get into that, though. That means to know some proposition is true. Given that you cannot have false knowledge, as knowledge requires P to be true, then if a subject knows P, then it would follow that if S knows that P, then P must be true. Now let's look at that before we get into the actual argument. To know P means that P is true, right? You can't know something that's false. There is no such thing as false knowledge. If I know 1 + 1 = 2, then 1 + 1 has to be true. There's no ways about it, right? Does that make sense? To know something means that the proposition, one of the requirements for knowledge is that the proposition be true, right? And the tripartite conditions for knowledge and justified true belief is P is true, subject believes P, and subject is justified to believe P. So based on those conditions, if I do actually know something, right? If I do know 1 + 1 = 2, then it follows that 1 + 1 = 2 must be true, right? I mean, I think we all kind of get that, right? All right, so using modal logic, this would apparently, and that's the kind of key word here, by the way, apparently, would be written as KSP implies is necessary that P is true. S means subject here. You'll see this written a lot this way. You may see A for agent, KAP. I've seen that as well. S is more common, I think. I just write KP. I don't even use the indexical. KP just means knows P. But whatever. KSP implies P necessarily is true. Now, this seems to be the case, right? I mean, this is apparently the case. If I know something to be true, P has to be true, right? So this is apparently how it would be written, although this is wrong, by the way. I'm telling you this right up the bat. This is wrong. Don't get your panties in an uproar here. I know this is incorrect, but it seems to be apparently the case. By the way, where's my live feed? You guys are awfully quiet. You guys die on me, or do I need to update? Did my live chat freeze? Because you guys are awfully quiet. Yeah, Feline, I'll fix that. Another example would be, for example, good catch. She's really good at proofreading. I think she should be an editor or something. That is redundant, isn't it? How about this? Another example would be something like another example would be let's see here. Would be something like, here we go. There we go. All right. So let me see if this flows a little bit better for you. Intrigued. Let me update this. It takes about 3 seconds to actually update on my end. Rez says we're not talking about listening. This must actually be cool. When people are this quiet, maybe they really are paying attention, right? So I figure there's two things. They're either bored out of their mind or they're actually paying attention. Yeah, I can put that too, Mackie. Another example is I can go back and edit that, but I it's fine for right now. Feeling says, I went to university. You get taught to proofread your own stuff, which is hard. Yeah, I know, right? Proofreading your own stuff is harder. Like, for example, I know what you're saying because we've had to actually trade papers with people in college. I had to give somebody my stuff. They had to give them their, and we had to actually, find each other's mistakes. So I know what you're saying. I think you probably had to do something like that too as an exercise, at least once or twice in college. So it is a lot easier to proofread other people's stuff than your own because you get myopic on it, right? You get focused. You don't see the bigger picture. It's always better to have a fresh set of eyes. I absolutely agree with that 1,000%. All right. So this would be read as if S knows P, then it is necessary that P must be true, which seems to be the case, right? However, this may not actually be the case. If P is 1 plus 1 equals 2, then the subject knows P would imply that P is necessary, which seemed to hold as 1 plus 1 equals 2 is necessary, is a necessary truth in all possible worlds. In that particular case, it would seem to hold to me. Like I said, this argument right here is derived from something else, but I've added a lot of stuff into it, like this, and I added some possible modalities, which was in the original. So I think that actually would hold, right? In that particular case, that statement would be true. If I do know P, then P is necessary, if and only if P is this, right? So that, well, no, I still wouldn't hold overall, right? It just would, in this particular case, in this particular instance, this would be true. If you instantiate P with 1 plus 1 equals 2, this statement would hold, but it clearly, I'll show that it clearly doesn't hold with other instantiations. Because obviously if P is something else, like I have to have one cat, at least one cat. If I know that I have one dog and 2 cats, then I have to have at least one cat. That doesn't hold, as we've showed earlier. So it just happens that this might be a case that it would be true, but overall, this statement right here is clearly not true. Intrigue says, we found a condition where 1 plus 1 is both 2 and 10. Actually, that's not the case. In binary, 1 plus 1 equals 1, 0, but 1, 0 represents 2. Those are the same things. They're just represented differently, right? So if you get rid of the syntax of it, right? Syntactically, they're different, but they do represent the same thing. They're extensionally the same thing. Intentionally, they're different, but extensionally, 1 plus 1 equals 10 and 1 plus 1 equals 2 are essentially the same exact thing. It's just one's in binary and one's in decimal. So 1 plus 1 doesn't ever equal 10, right? It just equals 1, 0, which represents 2 on the number line. That's the difference, between these problems when you have extensional versus intentionality. When you have two things that are phrased differently, but even though they come up with the same thing, we say that they're extensionally the same, right? We're going to have a topic on extensionality and intentionality, because I had to really go through and learn that stuff back when we were doing Photo's argument, right? Remember Photo's argument for natural selection? I really had to dive into intentionality versus extensionality versus de re versus de dicto, salvus, salvus veritas? Is that, what is it? You gotta make me look it up. I don't remember, but anyways, I had to really look into the de re and de dicto because that was really confusing to me, and so I finally figured that out. And I finally figured out the extensional versus intentional. So yes, 1 plus 1 equals 10 or 1 plus 1 equals 2 are extensionally the same thing, representing the fact that they represent 2 on the same number line. So the position. Anyways, off topic. Moving on. So it would be necessary that P is true, but what if Steve owns a dog? In some possible worlds, I own a dog. In other possible worlds, I do not own a dog. It is contingency. True in at least one possible world, but not in all possible worlds. Let's just say it is contingent. I'll fix that later. It's not contingency. It's not contingent. Not necessarily true in all possible worlds. Since there are possible worlds that exist where I do not own a dog, then KSP implies P is necessary is not the case. As me owning a dog is obviously not a metaphysical necessity or a logical necessity, right? So this is not true. If I know something, it doesn't imply that P is necessary, right? But it's still, wait a minute here. It is necessary P is true if I know K is true, KP, right? If I know P is true, then P has to be true by necessities. But this is where the distinction comes in by the modal operator. So let's look at the argument. Again, this is going to get rough here, so hopefully we can muddle through it and you guys can point out any errors on it. Take, for example, the argument. If S knows P, then P must be, and again, this is my own argument here. It's derivative, but it's my own argument. If P knows that P, then P, and by the way, when we say that S knows that P, we kind of imply that P meets all the tripartite conditions. So when we say S knows that P means that P is true, S is justified to believe P, and P does believe P. So that's what it means by saying S knows that P. It sounds grammatically incorrect, but this is actually how you would say it. S knows that P. So S knows that P, then P must be true. So using this modality right there, if P is true, then P cannot be false by the law of non-contradiction, right? It has to be true or false. It cannot be one or the other. So if it's true, it cannot be false. So that seems correct, right? Hi, Tom. All right, if P cannot be false, then P must be necessary. This is actually a relationship here, right? So this is read as not if P is not possible, right? If P is false, then P is necessarily not possible. Or P is not possible. Yeah. No, P is necessary. Sorry. Let me read that again. It's usually written the other way. I've seen it written the other way, because it's biconditional here. It means the converse is true. So if P is necessary, that means that P cannot be false. It is not possible for P to be false. So this little modal sign by that triangle when you see it means possible. So not P is not possible. So if you cannot be false, right? If it's not possible for P to be false, then P must be necessarily true, right? That seems to follow. And like I said, I've seen it written the other way, and it's biconditional, so you may not see it exactly written like this, but logically it follows. And I clear that with Zemo. Zemo think that's the case too. And Zemo knows a lot about logic. He actually knows Dr. What's his name? Dr. Not Graham Oppie, but Graham. Who's the modal guy? Who's the real genius in modal logic? Dr. Graham Hope? Is that his name? I don't remember, man. Oh well. He actually knows a very published expert on modal logic. When you guys can remember who is I was supposed to have him on the show too, and I can't remember his name. I forgot his name then too. I've never had him on. But I think his first name is Graham. You guys know what I'm talking about? You guys. Let me look here. I can find him because I remember looking him up before. Nope, maybe not. Maybe not Graham. Yeah, I don't remember his name. Damn it. Okay, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you guys remember? If I said the name, you guys would be probably you guys that know logic would actually know who he is. And the fact I'm not remembering it is really disconcerting. Priest, thank you. Yeah, Priest, thank you. Done. God damn, I'm terrible with names. I'm telling you, names suck for me. Dr. Graham Priest, is that his name? Yeah. But I've talked to him before, by the way. Done. I had an interesting discussion via email with Dr. Priest, and it was on modal realism and modal anti-realism, because I made the argument I was asking him a question. Yeah, Graham Priest. Yeah, like I said, Graham Oppie. I knew it wasn't Graham Oppie, but Graham Priest. And so I had asked him. I'm like, okay, here's my argument, or here's what I think. If you are a modal realist, right? If you believe that these possible worlds do exist, there is concreteness to them, and God does exist in at least one possible world, you would have to be a theist, right? Now think about that, right? If God exists in at least one possible world, which he does, that's a given. God exists in at least one possible world, and you're a modal realist rather than an anti-realist, which I'm an anti-realist, but if you're a modal realist, you technically are a theist because you believe that God exists, even though he exists in the other possible world. That possible world has ontology; it's real, and he actually agreed with that. Yeah, he actually agreed with that. Yeah, so interesting, right? Because that was something that was brought up in the Great Debate community quite a while ago. That particular topic, and we were thinking about it, and I was like, well, wait a minute. If you believe God exists in some possible world, which he does, then if you're a modal realist, wouldn't that make you a theist? Because a theist believes that God exists. It doesn't necessarily mean in the actualized world, right? But theism doesn't specify actualized world, right? It just says God exists, which means that he has existence. He has ontology, right? Which is because that's an ontological question. Weird, right? Feline says, how is not possible, P is not possible different than not P? Well, there are some differences in not that, because there's another form of logic, Feline, called intuitionist logic. And intuitionist logic doesn't allow for not P, right? Double negations don't exist in intuitionist logic. You cannot have indirect conclusions. You cannot have an indirect thing. You have to directly derive something. So you can't say like P equals not P in intuitionist logic. Interesting fun fact. So they are different. But not P just means P, right? Doesn't mean P is necessary. It just means P is true. So when you're saying it is not possible, not P is false. So when you're saying that it is not possible for P to be false, you have to say that it's necessarily P is true, right? You have to keep that modal operator there. Now, it is the case that if it is possible that if it's not possible P to be false, then P is true, then P, right? But it still is necessary that P. So yes, it is true. I would say that it is the case that it's not P. But again, not P doesn't hold true in all forms of logic, right? Just remember that. In intuitionist logic, not P doesn't let you derive P from that. Okay, you have to derive P on your own. This is again dealing when you're mixing forms of logic. This is why I like the concepts. I can do the concepts more than I can do the problems. I can't solve problems in logic. I'm very, very slow to do it. I've done it, and I will work with natural language things, but man, it's really difficult for me to solve a problem. Well, other people, they just get it like that. But all right, so moving on here. So if it is not possible that P is false, then P is necessary. And again, I think this is correct. I don't see a problem with that. Do you guys? Right? If S knows that P, then P must necessarily be true. Okay. Well, that again is just a reformation of this, really. I mean, must here is necessary, right? This is just a reformalization. If P is not necessarily the case, then not. How should I read this? I'm trying to think how I should read it too. Not the case that if you know P, then P is necessarily true. If P is not necessarily true, then if S knows P, that P, then P must be false. P must be true is false. So this is saying is if it's not necessarily true, right? That if S knows P, then the statement if S knows P, then P must be true is false. All possible knowledge, and I changed this a little bit, and this is where I think the problem may come into this argument, because I have to say knowledge knowable to S, right? S has to be able to know about this, right? There's a problem with knowledge that's unknowable. This gets into Finch's paradox, if you guys know what that is. That if all knowledge is true, the paradox basically shows that if all knowledge is true, then all knowledge is known, which seems odd, obviously, because we don't have all knowledge. But that's what Finch's paradox shows, is that if it is the case, given certain axioms, that if all knowledge, if to know means all, if all knowledge is true, then all knowledge is known. There you go. That's Finch's paradox. And of course, there's this. It's weird, but I wanted to relate it to possible knowledge, and this is where people may balk at this, and they might be right. But I conclude that all possible knowledge P to S are necessary truths, and this is how it be written using existential quantifiers. All possible knowledge to P. This is how I would write it. All possible knowledge to P implies P is necessary. Now, of course, this doesn't follow, right? Because all possible knowledge, let's say I'm S, let's say I'm the subject. All possible knowledge to me, everything that I have epistemic access to, are not necessary truths, right? Clearly. I exist. I know that I exist is not a necessary truth. I know that I have a cat is not a necessary truth. So this statement, this conclusion has to be false. But if this is false and it's a logically valid argument, which again may not be, but I think it's logically valid, then one of the premises must be unsound, right? It must be false. Which one is it? Well, I would say it's the first one based upon this right here, because this right here, remember when I said initially, is false. Well, let's find out why it's false. The conclusion seems to imply that we know P, then if we know P, then the truth of it is necessary. This, of course, this seems, of course, as quite untenable conclusion, as there are truths that are contingent, such as me owning a dog is contingent, right? There's no metaphysical necessity for that. So all possible knowledge to me cannot be necessary truths. Some of them are, but not all of them, and probably not even the vast majority of them. All right. So how do you resolve this fallacy of misconditionalization? Once again, by changing the scope of the modal operator. By drawing the modal operator right here, saying it is necessary that given this, right? Now the statement is, if S knows that P must be true is necessary given it is by necessity that to know P, then P must be true. Restricting the scope of it, right? Saying that given these things, then is the case, right? Is necessary. It's called relative by necessity, right? Relative necessary, meaning it is necessary given these conditions, but not necessary as in all possible worlds. All right, so if S knows that P, then P must be true, given this modal operator out here, right? Because again, we're changing the scope, right? It would be read as, it is necessary that if knows that P, then P must be true. I think that follows clearly. If P is true, then it cannot be false. Again, law of non-contradiction. If P cannot be false, then P must be necessary. Again, for the same reasons here, right? This again is read as, if not P is not possible, P must be necessary. If S knows that P, then P must be necessarily true. Again, just a restatement of this. If P is not necessary, then S knows that P, or I know that P here, is not necessary as false, right? So all possible knowledge P to S must be true. This actually is, I would think, is the case, right? All propositions where it is for all of P that it is necessary that all knowledge known to me, which is possible, right? Again, this is how I write it. And again, I actually drew that off of I think it was from Finch's paradox from SEP. So this is how it would be written and understood as all possible knowledge to P, right, or to S, is true, right? And notice the modal operator is not here anymore, right? The modal operator is drawn out here. So it's not saying that all knowledge that is possible to me is necessarily true, because that would be wrong. It's all possible knowledge to me is true, right? And that would be true, right? Because if I know something, it must be true. We can't see the modal error in that if S knows that P, then P must be necessarily true. If S knows that P implies P is necessary, is not true. Or S can know that P and P must be true, but not necessarily be true in all possible worlds, which I think we've already established. The conclusion is merely just relatively necessary. It is necessary that if S knows that P is true, given the scope of the argument. And special thanks to my friend Zemo, who's extremely good at logic, who took the time to look this over and had me fix a number of things. He was still unsure about the second argument, as am I, but I will leave it to the reader to evaluate it. If there are critical mistakes in the logic, please message me so I can correct them ASAP. And there you go. So let me do some things real quick. I just want to fix one thing before I forget. I'll fix them later. But anyways, guys, so what do you guys think of that? I mean, again, I like trying to come up with things. I like running new arguments. Like I said, the second one is a newer argument. I just took it from something else and I made it into a little more complicated. I look a little more twisted a little bit, right? I added the the possibilities, right, and I added the fact that it has to be things that we know about. Now, again, I don't think it changes it too much, but I think the distinction to be made there between what we know, is knowable, and what is not knowable, because I think there are truths out there that are unknowable, which is one way to resolve kind of the Finch's paradox. The Finch's paradox is kind of against skepticism, against anti-realism more than anything, and so I think there are epistemic limitations where there is knowledge that is unknown to us. And again, these are just my philosophical positions. They can change. There's no right or wrong answer to it. When we get into the discussion with T-Jump, maybe we might talk about that a little bit, because he has a weird way of looking at epistemology. I'm going to do a hangout later. I don't know if I'm going to do it today, maybe later tonight on the Great Debate Community channel. Please like and subscribe to that channel in the video description, the Great Debate Community channel. The original, watch whatever version of the Great Debate channel you want. I don't care. I don't watch any other version because they're ridiculously stupid, from what I understand. But the one I have, we're trying to at least still put some product out in there because people want it, and I like doing it on the Discord. I was talked into it. Bullinator, who's out there, is a big fan of Discord, and he's like trying to get me more acclimated to it. So I do things from the Discord twice a week. Anybody can join on the Great Debate Community channel, but the link is in the video description to go sub to that. So I might do that later on, part 2 of the thing that I had done for T-Jump that I'll be talking about. But there's a couple of things that T-Jump has that I think is kind of odd. Do you guys want to talk about that for a minute, or do you guys want to like call it a day and just keep this about the modal logic? Completely up to you guys. So what do you guys think? Let me read the... Mackie says there's certainly a knowledge hiccup through there. Yep, I agree with that. I think Demon Dunn says I think this is correct. He says your work on the screen works out. Yeah, I think so as well. But again, there might be technical issues. I just might have made a gross mistake. I don't know. But this is why I say I'm throwing it out there to be evaluated. The first part I think is pretty correct though. The second premise is false by the same exact scope fallacy. If P is true, then P is not false. But it doesn't mean P cannot be false. And that's true too. Yeah, there's a scope issue in the premise itself. I understand that. I didn't want to get too involved in that. I think it'd be a good I think this was a good stream. If you wanted to switch topics, just launch another stream with different title. Okay. You guys would agree with that? I mean, usually this Sunday I just kind of talk about stuff, and I just kind of it doesn't necessarily have to be about the topic. But if you guys want me to like leave it just with this, I can do that, or I can just continue to bloviate for a little more longer. Like I said, I got nothing else going on today, so. Feeling says, I feel like you made a mistake. Well, yeah, I mean, okay, but what is it, right? I mean, it seems odd to me too, right? But unless I can pinpoint it, then. But I'll leave this out there for people to evaluate, so. Well, I'll just leave you guys with this. So I'll talk about the T-Jump thing for a few, because like I said, is it going to like be down there? I know that Vosh and Destiny will be down there because they're going to have, it's primarily for their discussion. I'm spending money to actually go down there and stay overnight. I don't know why. I'm not making anything out of this, right? I don't know why I'm doing this, except it gets me out of town. I like to meet James, but I have no idea. But anyways, a couple things I wanted to talk about with T-Jump. Obviously, the whole prescriptive or the stipulative uses of his word atheism, but his is-ought problem seems odd too. The way he resolves an is-ought is basically to get rid of the ought and just have the is, which doesn't resolve anything. So I won't go into too much on that. I'll do that on the Great Debate Community stream tonight, I guess. Yeah, I think so. You're right. Messenger reveals. Shorter means more people watch. Although These don't get a hell of a lot of views. It's so funny because people were like, we really want the science and the philosophy and the logic and all this stuff. And then I do those videos and they get half the views, right? Which is to be expected. I had no doubt about that because they're more niche, right? So, obviously my views have gone down and I'm cool with that. I totally expected that, right? We recognize that that's going to happen when not everybody was watching my channel for that kind of stuff. So when I just kind of limited it to philosophy, science, and occasionally we'll have like we'll have some stuff on drama, I guess. But I try to incorporate that in the caffeine corner kind of stuff, right? Which we do every Monday, 11 o'clock with Cheshire. But these types of the videos, they're not that viewed, and obviously I'm not getting a lot of super chats because the people that seem to super chat are the ones that don't really like these topics. They like the drama stuff. But I've always said I'm not doing it for the money. Just I want to make enough to survive. And I'm going to try to keep to that, right? So even though I'm making far less right now, I mean, seriously far less because I've gotten rid of all that drama. It is what it is, right? I have to be consistent. But my Patreon, if you guys want to be a Patreon, please do so. If you want to be a member, please do so. Those are big things to me because those are consistent every month, right? So I do appreciate it. And I like doing stuff like this. I mean, it took me 3 days to make this blog. I mean, I had to go over with people and I was thinking about it. Usually I just throw it out there, but this one was a little more challenging to me. But I thought it'd be interesting to show that by reading something, it could look as if the conclusion is false on a valid and sound argument. And the reason it looks that way is because the premise is false because of a scope error, right? And again, that is called the modal scope fallacy. Got a scummer for £5. Thank you, Scholars. And by the way, it doesn't take much. If I can make $10 a video, I'm happy, right? I mean, but still, obviously, I like to make a little bit more. A lot of prep work goes into this stuff. But on the caffeine corner, I actually am losing money on that actually right now because I pay Dave at a very flat amount, and I pay Cheshire a percentage of the super chat. So last caffeine corner, I actually lost money. It is what it is, right? But I have to survive. And I do hope that people like this content, but I only want them to donate if they like the content. Right? If my patrons don't like the content, if my members don't like the content, tell me that, and I can change it to what you like a little bit, even though I got to tell you, I do this for me. I do what I like. But I will modify it somewhat for my patrons. But if my patron said, hey, we want you to do, cat videos, it's not going to happen. I'd rather lose the Patreons. I don't want to do stuff I don't want to do, right? So please let me know. But again, we are waiting for non sequitur. It's in the works, and we are going to continue building stuff on this channel. I will have a lot more stuff coming in. It's just I've been waiting, so it's driving me nuts. I hate waiting. The messenger reveals, because your haters will also watch the dumpster fires more than looking for clips and sound bites, and that's true, right? And that's exactly true, Reels. I knew that my views would go down because a lot of the haters aren't watching this stuff anymore. They're not going to sit through 2 hours or even an hour worth of logic video, right? What are they going to get out of it, right? I mean, sure, if they have a logical error, they're going to be like, hey, Steve fucked up in his logic. But who cares? Because I admit there might be some mistakes in here. They're not going to be worried about such things. If they are, then it makes no sense to me for them to try to rally that against me, right? Godless says I didn't even read the super chat. £5. If the rival GDC wants to have good discussions and I'm on board, it's just going to be a Screw Steve's channel, then he'll fall flat on his face. I guess there's a couple people using the GDC. God bless them. Reds told him to do that last year, which is funny. I don't give a shit. From what I understand, they have nothing of interest. It's just one big clusterfuck. Whatever. The GDC that I have on my channel has always had interesting topics. It's going to continue. And it's not going to be for gaming too, because I've had games in there. Somebody the other day was like bitching that I had Fishing Planet on it. And I was like, so what? I have always had games on that channel. I don't get that. What's the argument? Right? The GDC is a catch-all. But we are going to have more Discord stuff on there. I am going to be putting more stuff on there as well. The reason I don't put a lot on it is because I have the membership for this one. I don't have the membership for the other one. I think the members, they get something out of it, right? So I wanted to have more on this channel because my membership is for this channel. It's not for the GDC. But maybe I'll figure out something for the GDC where I don't want to have a membership for that. I really don't. There's no reason to, I don't think. Unless it got really, really much larger. If I got to 10,000 subs, then yes, maybe. But right now, the membership is for this channel to help support my efforts to explain these things and to get interesting people on and have people like Dr. John Kroon on, who I'm going to have. If I get people like, who else am I supposed to have on? Obviously Landon. Supposed to have Landon on. But I mean, I want to have guests back on this channel. So we're going to be start doing that. I just didn't want to have too many because I want to save some of the bigger stuff for non sequitur. Messenger says, you have to do what you're passionate about, otherwise it will come across as insincere. Keep doing you, but suggestions, of course, are welcome. That's exactly it. Anybody who says that I do these for views and money obviously fucking doesn't know me, because for 8 years I've done what the hell I want. I have on who I want. I have been consistent as fuck when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, and by the way, this is obviously demonetized because I cursed, because YouTube sucks when it comes to that. They demonetize everything. It's ridiculous. So the people that right now are my members, the people that are supporting me through Patreon, the people that are supporting me through Super Chat, I am very, very grateful for it. And I'm okay with that going down a little bit. I plan that to be the case because I got rid of a lot of the other stuff we were talking about, which was the big money. I mean, people, I don't know what it is, but drama sells. There's no question about that, right? But I don't want to be that person who uses drama for income. I will talk about drama when it comes up if it's necessary, but I'll do that on the Great Debate Community channel, and I'll do so very selectively, right? I'm not going to be talking about very specific people that are just trying to screw with people, because we've decided as a group not to do that. We found out, of course, that these people were harming actual people, harming my friends. And if you guys remember on the Great Debate Community, we decided we're not going to have that kind of toxicity around. And I'm going to try to abide by that. I don't want that toxicity around. Those people that are just doing drama for views are exceptionally toxic. We know this. We've seen it. If people want to watch it, as Godless Scummer said, if you want to watch that other stuff, go for it. Do what you do you, man. But this channel and my Great Debate Community channel are not going to be toxic ever. So Kino says, I sent you a message about a topic. Cool. Thank you, Kino. I'll read that later. Tom Stuff says, I support Steve whenever I can. I'm actually dirt poor in comparison. Tom does through PayPal, and I appreciate Tom. Look, don't spend money you don't have. Look, I know what it's like to be flat broke, right? I was for quite some time until like 6 months ago. Flat fucking broke. I mean, I wasn't getting any money from non sequitur, obviously. So it was rough. It was really rough. I got a little bit saved up now. And that's only because if I have to move, which I probably will be moving in 6 months to the end of the year. Good chance I'll be moving. I need something to help me move. So I have something reserved. So I'm not asking for people to give me money to help me move. I'm not going to do that. Obviously, people have, and that's fine. I get it, right? But I don't need it. I don't need money to help me move. I have stuff saved. What I need is just people that want to donate and be Patreons and be members because they like the content. That is my biggest thing. I really don't like if somebody doesn't like the content, I don't want them to be a Patreon then. It just, to me, that's how it works. That's how it should work. Patreon means that you like the content. I'm not like those other content creators, like just say, hey, give me money in my PayPal. I will create drama. I will fabricate stuff. I'll lie about people. I'll treat people like shit and dehumanize them just for money. This is what the vast majority of content creators that I'm seeing doing this do. And I know I shouldn't say the vast majority of them. I said the vast majority of the people that we seem to know to be doing this for doing these kind of drama stuff seem to be doing it for the money, just because they want or attention. I shouldn't say it's one or the other. It's not always for the money. I have to be honest. I think a lot of them do it just because they want the attention. I think they're either narcissistic or they have egos or they just want to feel like they're being heard. And so they do it for the attention, to feed themselves, to feel better about themselves, because they have some have very low self-esteem. But that's my take on it, at least. But anyways, I'm glad you brought that up. So I appreciate that. Super Chat, I know, is kind of a rabbit hole. But yeah, there's only one original GDC channel. I have the original. I own the domain, www.greatdebatecommunity.com. I trademarked it as far as like meaning that I was going to use the thing for merchandise. I'm not going to any longer. I don't care. There's no I was talking to my lawyer about actually trademarking it through the traditional methods, and we were starting that process, but I realized it really wasn't worth it. I don't care. Somebody else, I'm not going to use it for merchandise, so there's no sense to me to actually trademark it. If somebody else wants to, I don't give a shit. Whatever. It's a lot of money. It's a couple $100 to do so, and I don't see any value out of it to do it. I'm not using it commercially. So that's the whole point. When I put the little TM on the Great Debate Community, that just means I intend to use it commercially, and I no longer intend to commercialize it. But so I might take that off. I don't know. And then again, I might change my mind. Maybe I might commercialize it once we get non sequitur back, because we want to integrate the Great Debate Community channel with the non sequitur. So we're going to see what happens with that, I guess. Tom, I will send you a 6-figure demand when you make jokes about Croatians that trigger me. That's funny. Steve is poor too. He wears the same sweater every week. Yeah, no, I wear this on Sundays. This is my Sunday sweater. I said I was going to start doing that. It's just a tradition for me now. But anyways, I'm going to end this because I want people to be able to digest it, and I want it under 90 minutes. So thank you guys for watching this. Like I said, if you guys find any errors, let me know. But I do appreciate all your support. Please become a member of the channel. It's not that much, a couple bucks. And also, it's great if you become a Patreon too. $10 a month, split 5 ways each. 5 for the membership, 5 for the Patreon. I would really appreciate something like that from the people that have stuck around. But again, it's only if you like the product. I don't show myself out that much. I really don't. I haven't had a sub drive. I've been saying I'm going to have a sub drive, and I haven't even done that. I'm really sucky at these things. So, but I appreciate all the people that have become a member, Kino and Messenger Reveals, and Tom, even though he's not a member, he does donate regularly through PayPal, and I do recognize that. I do shout out to all the people that are supporting the channel, and if you become a Patreon, I do thank you when you become a Patreon, and you have instant access, so I communicate with my patrons quite frequently. So I do really hope people do decide to become a Patreon and do decide to become a member of the channel. It helps out tremendously, especially now because, again, going back to the science, going back to philosophy, it has gone down exponentially, to be expected, right? But I'd rather have that. I'd rather make less and do what I want and not have the toxicity around than some of these other content creators. I'm not doing this for donos, okay? But anything else? I pretty much have 10 black Hanes undershirts I wear at home, all about comfort, and I'm boring that way. Yeah, no, I bought me 2 gray Hanes. I think they were Hanes undershirts. Maybe they're not Hanes, but I bought 2 gray ones. They're comfortable as hell, and I left one behind, and Sweet Heathen took it last time she was out to California. So now she has it, and I have the other one, which is kind of sweet. It's matching. But they were so comfortable. She's like, she even says, she's like, I'm not giving this back. It's comfortable. I was like, I know. That's why I bought it. Oh, well. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this. And like I said, maybe today on tonight I have I'll broadcast on the GDC channel too when we get some open hangout. How does that sound? Because I didn't have a rum of coke night the other night. But let me know what you guys think about the video. Let me know think about the logic. And like I said, please like, subscribe. Like is not so much. Well, like anyways, because it at least helps the algorithm. Or just like, it helps the algorithm too. Subscribe and leave comments. That helps as well. But I would appreciate people start sharing these videos. I will have a sub drive eventually. So if you watch this video, share it out to people and ask people to subscribe. At least get me I think I need 10 more subs to get me back to 13,000, which would be nice. All right. So thanks, Message Reveals, and everybody else that has become a member. Kino, I appreciate it, guys, very much, and we'll see you later. Good night.